Greetings. Welcome to a talk on the last Ukrainian, a part of the series of the new art of war. I send you greetings. I am Gurvinder Singh, your host from Guru Wanda. There is a group of very powerful and wealthy countries, and they are this which we call the collective West. These include Europe, America, and Canada. And between them, they control 35% of the world's GDP and have a population of 11% of the world's population. So the grouping is being called the collective West, are extremely powerful, and over a period of time, to maintain their power and their wealth generating ability, they have constructed a system of rules and procedures and laws, which is called a global rules-based order. Now, this rules-based order is actually designed so that it works in their favor and at the cost of other nations and societies, irrespective of what they would like, irrespective of what their culture is, irrespective of their values or dreams or aspirations or their methods. So no dissidence is permitted or tolerated. But yet, because of the prestige and awe that America inspires, for all the faults of the rules-based work order, it seemed to work. And it worked pretty well from 1948 till the year 1921, when the Soviet Union was dissolved. And that's when some very powerful and wealthy people got together and said, we want the world and we can have it. We could have complete global power. So these people, we will call them as globalists. These globalists are visible. They're sitting at the helm of government and institutions, but the vast majority of these influential people remain invisible to the public. The conflict in Ukraine is the latest and most prominent battlefield staged and driven by these globalists from afar as part of the large master plan for total global power and domination. So today what we see is centuries-old fraternity brothers in ethnic Russians and Ukrainians have been set against one another. Individuals, families, and organizations, along with their assets, are being ravaged, where sweat and tears cannot stem the lifeblood from gushing out. There, the globalists play. The entire tragedy of the war is being portrayed as a great and noble war, but in reality it's a demonic charade, and it is being facilitated by governments and the media in the collective West. So globalists who are primarily based in America and Europe have engineered this crisis. They are the ones pulling the levers of finance and the resources and wealth of their countries to set Ukraine upon scaffold to be dismembered and destroyed. So since 1991, after the fall of the USSR, the globalists have pushed America to initiate and participate directly in more than 100 military interventions. And these are recorded interventions. We do not know about what has not been recorded or has come in the eye of the public. So the globalists are egging on the Ukrainian leadership to do the West's bidding, assuring them of unlimited support to destroy Russia. But unsaid is Ukraine itself will be destroyed. But why Russia? Russia is the second largest obstacle to the globalists' agenda of achieving global domination and control. The globalists use various fig leaves such as European values, democracy, freedom, integrity, etc., all untrue. And this is all being done to cover their true objective to break up and seize control of Russia using Ukraine as the battering ram. Sometimes, however, the fig leaf falls off and we discover the naked truth by the actions and utterances of various leaders in the West. We will fight Russia to the last Ukrainian, say many lawmakers and politicians in America and Europe. You can read it about in the American Conservative magazine, where it is clearly spelled out. And this is not a lie or anything. It is not hidden. It is expressly mentioned. And war hawks like Joe Biden and Anthony Blinken and Senator Lindsey Graham and John Bolton, etc. They are all egging on Ukraine. War, 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 war. To put it in short, the game of death and destruction, this war in Ukraine, is actually a war between Russia and America, with the hyperactive and over-enthusiastic participation of its frenetic Russophobic allies in Europe. So what exactly is this game they are playing? So one can get a glimpse of this if one looks at the report of the RAND Corporation, which is a government think tank based in America, which advises and proposes, and which has been adopted as official American policy. The link for the article I will attach in the description, so you can look it up. Where the objectives of extending Russia and the government's objectives and plans are clearly spelled out. Like all complicated and dangerous games, there are games within games, full of intriguing and demonic agendas and players. Enough produce an entire book, the complexity. Put it simply, the main players are America and its European allies versus Russia and its supporters. So America wants to bleed Russia by 1,000 cuts and denude it of its military and economic strength, to destroy all opposition to the interests of the collective West. Whereas ravaged Russia and humiliated after the dissolution of the USSR with a desire for self-preservation and to regain a semblance of dignity and global influence, of which it is rightly deserving and formerly had. So we have two people, one for power and greed, and one for existence with dignity. So self-preservation, I think, always will trump over power. So how did they go about this game? America staged an illegal regime change in Ukraine in 2014 to literally own it and make it hostile to Russia. Then America began to convert Ukraine into a formidable fighting force, defended within a fortress. So what has happened? Over the past 7 years, Ukraine has witnessed the following. A 9-fold increase in highly trained manpower, military manpower, going from 50,000 people to approximately 500,000 people. These include 200,000 combat soldiers, 250 paramilitary, and 50,000 reservists. In the meantime, a massive inflow of $15.5 billion of weaponry and supporting equipment and systems was set up in the Ukraine and made completely interoperable with NATO forces and all other NATO systems. That is why Ukraine was deployed in many areas of combat where NATO was involved, such as in Afghanistan or in Libya. So Ukraine became the second largest armed force in deemed NATO. It was not officially in NATO, but it's in the deemed NATO. And this is second only to the American forces. So when in 2008, the collective West announced its intent to induct Ukraine into NATO, the alarm bell started ringing in Moscow. The objection of the Russians to NATO housing nuclear weapons just 5 minutes flying time from Moscow was ignored, and the protests were just brushed aside. And this reveals the arrogance of NATO. But America has some very fine brains and a lot of experience. They looked back and said, learning from their own mistakes and what happened to the USSR's intervention in Afghanistan, they formulated a strategy not to have a quick, decisive victory in Ukraine and Russia, but to deploy a long-running conflict that would impoverish and bleed Russia to the point of collapse. That Ukraine would be wrecked is of no concern to the globalists and the collective West. So after the launch of the Russia's special military operation in February this year, 2022, Ukraine has been constantly financed, armed, and resupplied bit by bit by NATO, just enough to survive and keep fighting, providing them insufficient weaponry and ammunition, denied the state-of-art equipment, etc., to pit themselves against a superior, well-equipped, and economically and militarily prepared Russia. Ukraine can only bleed Russia, not destroy it, whilst itself being destroyed bit by bit. So the West, on their part, would finance Ukraine in the war, economically attack Russia to deny it the possibility to use its own funds and income, discredit and isolate Russia within the world community, weaponize Ukraine to the extreme and let them fight Russia for as long as it takes, deploy NATO experts, commanders, satellites to provide back-end support to Ukraine. So how will this actually play out? And what is the thinking behind it? What is the mathematics and the logic? So based on conventional practices, the American military game plan is as follows. And normally an attacking army needs to have about 3 times more the number of soldiers than the defenders. So if Ukraine has 500,000 soldiers, then Russia would need to deploy about 1.5 million people, though Russia has only about 1.35 million. That means they would have to recruit more people, and they would all be deployed, leaving the eastern flank and the southern flank and the northern flank of Russia's borders virtually unprotected. Typically in a war, the kill ratio is about 0.8 to 1.2. One party has 80% of the casualties and one has 120% of the casualties. So if they estimate that if 300,000 Ukrainians die, then Russia would also lose anywhere between 240 to 360,000 soldiers. And that is not only the deaths, because for every man that is killed, there are 3 soldiers get injured. So you would be looking at more than 1 million people being injured. Can you imagine the financial liability of looking after these veterans, injured, incapacitated? What a great burden it would be on any society. So a huge amount of finances would have been expended on this war, and the financial load would crush Russia, particularly when you have stopped its ability to use its own income, its own resources, and its own funds. And when both parties, Ukraine and Russia, would have exhausted themselves, America and Europe would march in triumphantly as peacekeepers into Kyiv and Moscow. The globalists would swoop down, and along with their oligarch partners, to completely own and control both Russia and Ukraine, one of the richest places, minerally and resource-rich places in the world. So the math is very simple. Russia and Ukraine could thus be conquered by the globalists at a nominal cost of about $100 billion. paid for by the American and European taxpayers, and they would seize assets and resources worth $50 trillion dollars of exploitable commodities, oil, gas, and mineral resources, industry, and infrastructure. And that would be achieved without actually setting a single boot or soldier on Ukrainian or Russian soil, theoretically. Now, that is indeed a very devious plan, which could have only had its seed and grown in the mind, demonic mind, and evil mind of the globalists. That people in Europe and Russia and Ukraine would freeze and starve, even elsewhere in the world. But the globalists will never ever backtrack. That is why there is unprecedented and illogical support for war rather than peace. So that is why I'm not in favor of supporting Ukraine to sacrifice itself, but to make peace, to escape the machinations of the globalists, to take the olive branch to save itself and save us all. That's from me for today. I thank you for joining me, and I look forward to you joining me again on this channel. If you like the video, please press the like button, share with others, and subscribe to my channel. The links that I have to the references that some of the references that I have taken is provided in the description, and I welcome you to pursue those for your own further education and understanding. Good day. This is Gurvinder Singh signing off.